Hi Jason, here's your video analysis from last weekend's clinic. So the process here is that we're going to take a look at your stroke and we're going to break that down into 7 different components. And if there's any magic or secret sauce to what we do, it's the order to which we reassemble these things. So when you're approaching fixing a lot of this, and there's going to be a lot of information here, approach it in the order that we're presenting it now and fix each of those things. And I would recommend spending, a number of days on each of the concepts. So it's going to be enough information to keep you busy for a little bit and should make a big difference. First thing we're going to take a look at is your alignment. And really what we're looking for here is that your body is aligned with the surface, much like we talked about at the clinic. And you can see you've got kind of this is a breathing stroke here, and you can see if we kind of trace your body line, you've got kind of this roundedness to your body line where your hip down here is riding a little bit low. My recommendation here is to kind of tighten up that core a little bit. Try and think about yourself being kind of like a long spear that's parallel with the surface. If we look at a non-breathing stroke, it's not quite as exaggerated, but you can still see this bow in the middle. And this may be causing, I don't know if you've had any symptoms with some low back pain when you wear your wetsuit, but it definitely, if you swim long enough this way, your low back here is going to start to bug you a little bit, and you may have already felt that. So think about tensing up your core right here in the middle of your stroke and swimming with more of a straight line in terms of your body alignment. Second concept is orientation. This refers to how deep you're swimming. And what you can see here is out in the front of your stroke, you're pretty high in the water. And then in the middle, you can see that break in your back, and then your legs are quite a bit lower than your upper body. And I would imagine that when you don't swim with a wetsuit, you probably feel this a little bit more. That wetsuit is creating some lift back here. What you want to do, once again, tighten that core like we just talked about, and think about yourself kind of like you're on a teeter-totter. If you pressure in front here, you're going to create a little bit of lift in the back. At the same time, you want to relax and allow yourself just to kind of find that good float position. Here you're definitely riding higher than what's natural. You can see all this lift up in the front of your stroke. That lift is coming from what you're doing with your pull, which we're going to get to in a minute. So allow yourself to find that good float position where you're just floating in the water, and then you're going to propel yourself forward from there. Rotation, what we like to see here is about a 20 to 30 degree rotation from side to side. We can see here we got quite a bit more than that. You're nearly 90 degrees with your hips here on your rotation. That's a breathing stroke. Here's a non-breathing stroke. It's not quite as exaggerated, but it's still too much. This is still greater than 45 degrees. Remember, once again, we're looking for 20 to 30 degrees. The downside to rotating this amount is it actually disconnects your core from your pull, and you don't get to drive as much power through the stroke. And it also slows your stroke tempo or cadence down a lot because it takes time to rotate all the way over here to your side and then rotate all the way back over past that 45 degree mark here on this other side too. So think about keeping that rotation short and crisp, just enough to drive power through your stroke. You'll feel your tempo come up a little bit, and you'll feel a little bit more connected with your pull and your core. Next thing we look at is the actual timing of your pull versus your core. The good news is here that even though you're rotating too much, which a lot of times we see people have some serious timing issues when they do choose to rotate too much, you're actually not too bad here. What we're looking for, I'm looking at your hip right here, and I'm looking at that compared to when you start to pull. And what we want to see is both of those things moving at the same time. You can see here, this is your catch and your stroke. Pull, pull, pull. Right about there, your hips get involved, and it looks fairly connected to me. So that's good news. Over here, here's a non-breathing stroke. This is your left arm. Once again, you're pulling and rotating at roughly the same time. This looks pretty good. We're going to kind of get to check this one off the list a little bit in terms of timing. Fourth concept is breathing, and we always like to kind of take a look, like we talked about in the clinic, making sure you're really exchanging air well and exhaling underwater. And what I see here is that, when you turn your head to the side for that breath, we want to see that when you put your face back in the water, we should see lots of bubbles here out in the front. And really, we're not seeing any bubbles at all. You're really holding your breath. And there you're turning your head to the side, and really you haven't exhaled at all. I didn't see any bubbles. you've got a lot of air in your lungs, and we'll see like a big exhalation cloud when you exhale properly, and we're not seeing any of that. So this is certainly a concern. You probably feel this, I'm sure, like you're not really getting a full breath of air, or that you're not being able to use your fitness completely, and that's because of that lack of exhalation underwater. So make sure you're blowing lots of bubbles. Good free air exchange underwater. You're going to feel a lot better with that. Next concept is pulling, and as I alluded to earlier, there's a combined thing that's happening here. You're not aligned, number one, because you've got this bow in your back. You're also swimming really high in the front of your stroke. And the combination of those two things is forcing you to struggle to find what we call a vertical forearm. You can see here, if I draw a line from your fingertips to your elbow, and then we draw some perpendicular arrows to that, shows us where you're pressuring the water. And you can see what that's doing here. It's creating all that lift up in the front of your stroke. There's an equal and opposite reaction to that. So ideally, what we'd like to see from this position is, if this were your upper arm, we would see your fingertips directly below your elbow. And then you would pressure that directly backwards. And as we take a look at that line between your elbow and your fingertips, we should see a series of vertical lines always pressuring the water back behind you in order to drive your body forward effectively. If we draw those same 4 lines for you, what we can see is that you've got a lot of downward pressure in the front of your stroke. That line looks great. That line's not bad either. Really, the concern is what's going on up here in the front of your stroke. Once again, you got to understand the cause and effect. This is being caused by your body position. This isn't something you can just jump in and try and get your elbow stacked over your fingertips until you get your alignment and orientation squared away. And once you feel comfortable swimming in a good balanced body position, that's going to free you up to be able to really work on this high elbow, or what we try to refer to as a vertical forearm position. If we take a look over here at your right side, we can see more of the same. You can see that elbow is low, lots of downward pressure, which once again is providing upward lift. Remember, what we want every time, anytime that we're either pulling or kicking, it should all be about this direction. That's really giving you the best forward propulsion. Last thing we're going to look at here is your kick. And with your application as a triathlete, we're looking for essentially your legs not getting in your way is the thing that I primarily look at. We're not looking for a really strong leg drive. You're a 2-beat kicker, and it's not something that I would really adjust. I would stick with that 2-beat kick, and what you're doing back there, you're conserving your legs, which is great. But what we want to make sure is that they're not getting in your way. You can see here you've got kind of this angle on your foot, which is creating drag along this line here. So when you're not kicking, and when you do kick, you can see it straightens out a little bit, but you're just not a phenomenal kicker. You've got this angle where you're pressing water down this way, and remember, there's that equal and opposite reaction. So essentially, you're just basically creating lift when you do kick. So you want to make sure that you point your toes. So we can see here, there's this picture again. We've got this foot kind of hooked, which is creating a lot of drag. It's like having an anchor back behind you. Do some ankle stretching. Sit back on your feet, stretch those out a little bit. And then when you're swimming, be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to have your foot hooked. Super important that you've got those toes pointed so they're not getting in your way. And by the way, this is from probably a lot of running in land-based activities and not being a swimmer your whole life. These ankles are a little bit tighter, so some stretching will help you to get those feet out of your way. All right, Jason, hey, it was great working with you. If you have any questions about your video analysis, let me know. Take care.